The Great Lakes are a majestic freshwater resource that we must protect for current and future generations. But while much progress has been made in cleaning up pollution of the Great Lakes, more must be done. In particular, Lake Erie is in trouble and needs our care. First, let's consider the dimensions of this critically important lake. The Lake Erie Basin is the most densely populated of the 5 Great Lake basins, containing 17 metropolitan areas with populations over 50,000. Lake Erie is the smallest and shallowest of all the Great Lakes. With its fertile soils, the Lake Erie Basin also is intensively farmed. About 63% of the lake's watershed is used for agriculture. Lands along the shoreline are dominated by residential uses, agriculture, and commercial uses. The IJC is an independent binational organization created by Canada and the United States under the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909. Under the treaty, the two countries cooperate to prevent and resolve disputes relating to the use and quality of the many lakes and rivers along their shared border. The IJC also has a role in advising the two countries on how to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the waters of the Great Lakes. The role of the IJC was crucial during the 1960s and 70s when loadings of nutrients, especially phosphorus, occurred from multiple sewage treatment plants and other sources. This nutrient enrichment, also known as eutrophication, resulted in severe algal fouling of the lakes, which in turn created severe aesthetic odor and fish die-off problems, especially in Lake Erie. These major pollution effects led the governments of Canada and the United States to sign the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in 1972, establishing a binational commitment to clean up the lakes. Within 10 years of signing the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, both countries had upgraded and expanded municipal sewage treatment plants, and phosphorus concentrations in household detergents had been reduced. By the mid-1980s, Lake Erie's phosphorus loadings were reduced by more than half from the 1970s levels, and many of the problems associated with eutrophication were reduced or eliminated. Unfortunately, these improvements were relatively short-lived. By the early 2000s, problems with nutrient enrichment in Lake Erie appeared again and have since continued to worsen. In 2011, for example, heavy rains in the spring flushed a large amount of phosphorus into Lake Erie. This was soon followed by warm temperatures, creating a mass of algae that extended more than 5,000 square kilometers, 3 times larger than the next largest bloom ever recorded. In 2012, recognizing the urgency and importance of this issue and the potential cost of further delay, the IJC launched the Lake Erie Ecosystem Priority and set a 3-year objective of providing scientific and policy advice to governments that would reduce nutrient loads and harmful algal blooms. The study found that in most years, the phosphorus loadings into Lake Erie have been below the 11,000 metric tons a year target established under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. The Western Basin received 64% of the 2003 to 2011 average loads, while the Central and Eastern Basin received 26% and 11%, respectively. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement originally focused on total phosphorus as the measurement by which Lake Erie eutrophication was to be managed, and those load targets have generally been met. Recent research has turned to DRP, a form of phosphorus that is highly bioavailable, as a potential issue of concern. The LEEP study also sought to identify the highest contributors of DRP. This analysis was carried out for water years 1998 to 2005, using models to estimate the sub-basin contributions of TP and DRP for 6 major catchment areas in the United States draining into the West Basin of Lake Erie: the Maumee, Sandusky, Grand, Raisin, Cuyahoga, Vermilion, and Detroit rivers. Analysis of loads from the Maumee, Sandusky, Honey Creek, and Rock Creek watersheds reveal that while DRP loads declined in the early 1990s, they have increased since the mid-1990s. The result of this modeling suggests that there are hotspot sources of DRP in subbasins within the major watersheds that contribute a large portion of the total phosphorus input. The LEEP study also found that average concentrations of total phosphorus and DRP in the Detroit River are low compared to those measured in other major tributaries. In contrast, the phosphorus concentrations in the rivers draining the agricultural areas of the West Basin, particularly the Maumee, are generally much higher and may have more direct influence on the development of harmful algal blooms. In the last decade, the blooms have developed earlier and extended later than in the past. The 2011 Lake Erie bloom was visible from satellites until mid-October. Blooms of microcystis have generally been reported from the western basin, but have recently been developing along the northern shoreline of the central and eastern basins. Other potentially toxic species have also been observed with increasing frequency. While cyanobacteria are known to produce a number of toxins, microcystins are of particular concern. Hypoxia refers to a condition where excessive nutrients and weed growth produce dead zones, typically near the lake bottom, where dissolved oxygen levels are so low that fish and other aquatic life cannot survive. Additionally, decomposing algae on the lake bottom may play a role in the type E botulism outbreaks, which cause significant numbers of deaths of fish-eating birds. In the summer of 2013, residents in Carroll Township, Ohio, were advised not to drink water from their local treatment plant due to high levels of microcystin originating from the source water, Lake Erie. This was the first time a toxin associated with algae led to a plant shutdown in the state. About the same time, water treatment plant operators in Toledo announced they required an additional $1 million to properly treat microcystins in Lake Erie water supplies. Other water treatment plant operators are incurring additional costs as well. They are trying to prevent harm to human health. If people drink water contaminated by microcystins, symptoms of exposure can include nausea, vomiting, and in very rare but severe cases, acute liver failure. The Lake Erie Ecosystem Priority Study sought to identify the key factors contributing to changes in Lake Erie's ecosystem, important trends in these changes, and the effects of these changes on the Lake Erie ecosystem, human health, and socioeconomic conditions. Based on the analysis, the IJC finds the current knowledge is sufficient to justify immediate additional effort to reduce external loadings of nutrients to Lake Erie. In its LEEP report, the IJC makes 16 specific recommendations to assist governments in setting phosphorus reduction targets, reducing phosphorus loads from both agricultural and urban sources, and strengthening monitoring and research. Here are some highlights. The LEEP report focuses on the Maumee River watershed as the highest priority for remedial action, recommending a 41% reduction in DRP loadings for the spring period compared to the 2007 to 2012 average. To help achieve this goal, the states of Michigan and Ohio should formally list the waters of western Lake Erie as impaired under the U.S. Clean Water Act. That would trigger development of a total maximum daily load or nutrient reduction plan, overseen by the U.S. EPA. A plan using both regulatory and non-regulatory measures should also be used to reduce loadings from Ontario watersheds. To address the complex challenge of pollution from any diffuse agricultural operation sources, the IJC recommends that governments throughout the watershed refocus agri-environmental management programs to explicitly address DRP. This includes an emphasis on best management practices, most likely to reduce DRP, such as improving the rate, timing, location, and form of phosphorus applied to fields and reducing the runoff from those fields. Such nutrient management initiatives should focus on reducing the load delivered during the spring period and on priority sub-watersheds that are delivering the most phosphorus to the lake. The IJC recommends that federal, state, and provincial governments work with municipalities to accelerate the use of green infrastructure, such as rain gardens, green walls, filter strips, bioswales, and engineered wetlands in urban stormwater management. Because wetlands both support biodiversity and filter pollutants, the IJC recommends that federal, state, and provincial governments, in concert with non-government partners, commit to fund a goal of a 10% increase to 1,000 hectares beyond current levels in coastal wetland areas in the western basin of Lake Erie by 2030, while setting a science-based goal for protection of wetlands inland of the coastal zone. The IJC recommends enhancing monitoring networks throughout the Lake Erie Basin, including establishment of a monitoring system at the outlet of the Detroit River that measures critical nutrient parameters. Further research is also recommended to improve understanding of the cumulative effectiveness of both rural and urban BMPs. The IJC has forwarded the report to the U.S. and Canadian governments. Several topics identified during the preparation of the report, including human health effects of toxic algae, computer models to predict the export of nutrients to the lake, and the economic impacts of algae blooms, will be investigated by the IJC in 2014 and 2015. Under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the LEEP report will help inform IJC's overall assessment of government progress in cleaning up the Great Lakes. The IJC offers its analysis and recommendations in the LEEP report in a spirit of cooperation, recognizing that today's challenges to Lake Erie's health are formidable and require the leadership and guidance of the United States and Canadian governments and collaboration by all sectors of society. The IJC believes this teamwork will occur as citizens and governments care deeply about the lake. Through such cooperation, the IJC is confident the recovery of Lake Erie can again become a globally known success story.